Any old port in a storm. Any old port in a storm. What is there to say about this one?
On Sunday, Donald Pleasance is going to be on. You people don't know Donald Pleasance, but in England, everybody knows Donald Pleasance.
He's one of the great actors in the world.
I was going to ask you to say that.
He is.
He's one of the great actors in the world.
Donald Pleasance does indeed star as hardcore wine lover Adrian Carcini, who is about to be named Man of the Year by these guys. Who are these guys anyway? The High Council of Wine? Anyway, the wind is taken out of Adrian's sails when his hated half-brother Rick drops by to inform Adrian that he plans to sell Adrian's beloved winery.
What?
Cue enough vicious put-downs to make Jarvis Goodland blush.
You know, Rick, you are so remarkably gauche. It pains me to feel we have the same blood coursing through our veins.
I'm getting married.
Congratulations. Who is it this time, a waitress or a topless dancer?
And my favorite?
Do you think I'm gonna sit by and let some muscle-bound hedonist throw me out of what is rightfully mine?
Hey.
But the biggest insult is from Rick to Adrian when he reveals he plans to sell the winery to those accursed Marino brothers.
Marino brothers. The Marino brothers. The Marino brothers! 69 cents a gallon, Marino brothers. They don't make wine. They don't even make good mouthwash.
Rick should know better than to come between a man and his winery. Rick's not dead just yet, and since this is Columbo, Adrian couldn't just do something simple and hit him again. No, he has to hatch a complicated plot involving tying Rick up in his airtight wine cellar and locking him inside with the air conditioning turned off while Adrian fucks off to New York for a whole week. Nice threads! When he returns, he dresses Rick up like a scuba diver and tosses him into the sea, making it look like Rick hit his head while diving and ran out of oxygen.
He suffocated.
But Columbo asks, why would Rick go diving on a day when it was raining? Why, if Adrian never lets anyone else decant the wine, did he ask this asshole to do the honors on the day of Rick's death? Could it be because pouring wine requires a steady hand and Adrian's were particularly shaky in the wake of, doing this? Far and away, this episode's biggest strength is Donald Pleasance. He oozes arrogance, egotism, and pomposity while bringing his trademark wild-eyed intensity to the role.
What's your point?
And yet there's a complexity, a sympathetic edge to Adrian Carcini.
He was a genuine eccentric. He was a man that loved wine, loved great wine. And that is, he hated things that were cheap, he hated things that were commercial, he hated things that were imitative.
He was about to watch his life's work, his life's passion, be sold for soulless profit, and Pleasance absolutely sells his desperation and desire to protect the only thing he's ever loved.
It's the only place in my entire life where I was ever really happy.
I admit I may be biased, as Pleasance happens to be my very favourite actor of all time. How could he not be? He's good in everything.
Gentlemen, you honor me beyond my accomplishments.
Every single line he utters is solid gold.
Nobody really needs a $5,000 bottle of wine, Karen. I just don't want anybody else to have it.
5,000 I have, who'll make it 6?
But hey, don't just take my word for it, because remember,
He's one of the great actors in the world.
In fact, the episode's other biggest strength is the relationship between Columbo and Carcini. This isn't another case where the lieutenant and the killer are politely pretending to like each other. Here, they just genuinely do. Both men are perfectionists. Both are obsessed with one particular thing. In Carcini's case, it's wine. In Columbo's, it's solving murders. In many ways, these two men couldn't be more opposite, but that one idiosyncratic similarity they share allows them to find a mutual respect for one another, despite everything else. And it's a genuinely beautiful thing to to watch. That's helped in no small part by the tremendous chemistry between Falk and Pleasance. These two actors appear to revel in each other's company as much as their characters do.
Didn't your family ever drink wines in home?
I'll tell you, the closest we ever came to it was my father's job during Prohibition.
Bootlegger.
No, he was a tail gunner on a beer truck.
As is usual for Columbo, any old port is an episode strengthened by a strong supporting cast. In this case, our two main female characters. As Rick's fiancée, Joan Stacy, Joyce Jillson joins a long line of Columbo widows, or bereaved significant others. What do you call it when your fiancé dies? Can you be a widow if you didn't actually marry them yet? Anyway, my point is, much like Joanna Ferris back in Murder by the Book, Joan serves to remind us of the human tragedy at the center of a murder investigation and keeps us emotionally grounded in between all of the other fun stuff, like Columbo being annoyed by a talkative drunk at the bar.
We asked Dr. William Martinez of the coroner's office about the case. Doctor?
Our preliminary examination shows that...
How does Columbo like it when someone keeps badgering him?
My theory, strictly unofficial, of course, is
trouble is, I don't have any buddies left, otherwise
deep dive, was knocked unconscious, and died before he woke up.
East of Eden star Julie Harris plays Karen Fielding, Adrian's dour secretary.
Karen Fielding. I think that's a lovely name.
She is loyal to him to a T, even to a fault, as she eventually ends up lying to Columbo to try and cover for him.
Well, you must like him very much.
And not so much because he's such a great boss to work for, but more because he's such a hunk that Karen's fallen head over heels in love with him. I mean, who could possibly resist Adrian's beguiling charms?
Well, let's go to dinner.
Harris is fantastically understated in the role, managing to somehow imply emotions without actually showing them. You can really understand where this character is coming from, and it's actually a little crushing to see how blatantly uninterested in her Corsini actually is.
Do you feel anything towards me?
I don't know, Karen. I really don't know.
Once she realizes, however, that she finally holds some power over him by having covered for him with the police, Karen's now in the perfect position to start putting the thumbscrews on Adrian and try to force him to marry her.
And I don't like being in that position.
Typically on Columbo, this would mean Karen's days are numbered, and Corsini's gonna drown her in a giant vat of wine or some shit. But luckily for her, Columbo's able to crack the case before there can be a second murder. Throughout Port, Columbo's own wine knowledge has been gradually improving. Watch how Pleasance can't contain his delight when Columbo correctly identifies a Burgundy.
That's really excellent. You astound me.
Followed by one of the show's greatest lines.
You really are a sly one, Lieutenant.
The lieutenant is able to put this newly acquired knowledge to use in finally closing the net on Adrian. Note that when he starts putting things together, Columbo whistles a particular tune. That is, of course, instantly recognizable as the tune to the children's nursery rhyme, This Old Man. This is the first time it's heard on the show, and it would later sort of become Columbo's own signature, if unofficial, theme song, to the point that many fans feel it was really overused in the 90s episodes, but we'll get to that later. Much later, thank God. Anyway, Karen's lie is that on the day of his death, she saw Rick leaving the winery alive, which would clear Corsini of any possible involvement. So it must have been an accident. To make up for suspecting him in the first place, Columbo treats both Corsini and Karen to dinner at a fancy restaurant. The maitre d' here is played by Vito Scotti, yet another recurring bit player, here in his first of 6 supporting appearances on Columbo. The food's good, but the pièce de résistance comes when Columbo orders a 1954 vintage Ferrier Port, one of the finest, rarest, and most expensive wines around. Adrian looks like he's about to come just by the bottle being opened in front of him. But things go tits up real quick when he finds the product to be less than satisfactory.
This is dreadful.
Monsieur, you...
This is dreadful.
The result is perhaps the greatest outburst you'll ever see from any actor in anything ever.
Monsieur Corsini, is there something wrong?
Is there something wrong? Everything is wrong. An exciting meal has been ruined by the presence of this liquid filth.
But what's the point of all this? How does this prove Carcini is guilty? Well, the taste of overheated wine triggers Carcini into realizing that all of the wine in his own cellar is probably overheated too. Remember, he turned the humidifier off in the vault while Rick was locked in there and Adrian was in London. During that week, a heat wave struck Los Angeles, which would have spoiled all of his precious wine collection. Now desperate to destroy the evidence, Carcini is forced to destroy the thing he loves the most and chucks his entire stock off a cliff. But there's someone waiting for him.
They were all ruined, weren't they?
To cap things off, Columbo reveals that the bottle of Ferrier Port was one he'd nabbed from Carcini's own collection in the first place, having snuck it from the cellar when Carcini wasn't looking. In the end, it was the thing that Carcini loved the most that betrayed him, and in a cruel irony, he ended up losing that very thing to cover up a crime he committed to protect it in the first place.
It must be killing you to throw all this stuff away.
Yeah, you've no idea. It's like...
This is another example of the murderer being hoisted by their own petard, much like Dr. Fleming back in Prescription Murder. Columbo knew that only Adrian Carcini's palate was delicate enough to be able to detect the oxidization of the wine, and it was this dedication to perfectionism in wine that ultimately spurred Carcini to incriminating action. They saved the best scene for last. Columbo and Carcini share one last glass of wine before the lieutenant carts Adrian off to jail for the rest of his days. This is nothing short of beautiful, and you really get the sense that out of all of his cases, this was the one time Columbo really wished he was wrong. This was the arrest he wished he didn't have to make.
You know, Columbo always nails the guy, but Pleasance was sensational, and I'll tell you why it was sensational, because he made it hard. He didn't make it hard to figure out, because Columbo can always figure. He made it hard emotionally. In other words, I liked the guy. He made me laugh.
And Falk sells it so perfectly, as does Pleasance, communicating so much with just a few looks, quietly accepting his fate. It's a perfectly bittersweet conclusion to their relationship, and carries a lot more emotion and pathos than most Columbo endings do.
Don't be too hard on me. You must try to understand.
Oh God, shut up. It's no secret that I love any old port in a storm.
May our enemies never be as happy as we are at this moment.
Indeed, for many a fan, this is a perennial favorite, and even Peter Falk once ranked it as the best Columbo episode ever. Who am I to argue with the man in the Mac himself?
You've learned very well, Lieutenant.
Thank you, sir. That's the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me.